Let's continue with our application by adding a new component, the update place component. Updates place.js in the places pages folder is added therefore. And in here, the idea is to also show a form where users can enter some data. But for this application, I want users to only be able to update the title or the description of a place. So let's import React from React here and create update place here as a component like this here, and then export update place again. That is what we did before. Now, update place is a component which, of course, should be loaded with routing. So for now, I'll just output some dummy content here and go to app.js to add a route. Here, it's that last page which we planned, which we want to reach under /places/ the ID of the place. And then here we want to, in the end, load that update place form. So here in our route setup, we can add a new route. And the path of that route is /places/ and then the place ID. Now, one important word here, this here and this path here, of course, are very similar. If we would change the order here and move that in front of places new, we would have a problem. Because then every URL entered that starts with /places and then has something after it would reach this route here. Because if we had /places/new here, new would be interpreted as a place ID. So in order to ensure that we don't cause this route to never be reached, we have to render this route first so that React Router first checks whether we want to go into this route. And only if we make it past this check, so to say, we look for this route. So the order matters here. And then in here, I want to render update place. So let's import that. Let's import update place from ./places pages update place like this. And then update place is the component we render here like that. So simple as that, this renders update place. And now with that, of course, we can go back to update place. Later, we will then get the ID of the place out of the URL and fetch information about this place from a server and initialize our form with that place data. Now we'll do that initialization part now, but of course we can't fetch the place data from a backend because we have no backend yet. So for the moment, I'll just get the ID from my server and then simply load my dummy place data. So here I will import use params from React Router DOM to get that actual place ID, which is part of the URL. And we can get this here and store it in a constant named place ID by calling use params. And then there we'll have a place ID field because, place ID here, because I named this dynamic segment here, place ID. So we can extract the concrete value for that segment by that identifier inside of update place. Now, as I mentioned, I then want to load one of my dummy places. So here in user places, we have that dummy places array. We could export it and simply import it in the other file or just copy and paste it, which is what I will do here outside of the component, just add it here. And now I want to find a place with the ID that I have in the URL from that array of places. So here, I'll have my identified place, or however you want to call it, which I get from dummy places by calling find. And there, I will go through all places and find the place where the ID is equal to place ID. That's my idea here. Now, if we don't find a place for the provided ID, for the moment, I'll just return something. So I'll check if not identified place and return could not find place if, well, I could not find it. Maybe wrap this in a div with a class name of center so that this is nicely centered. We'll have better error handling later once we have a backend and we connect this application to the backend. At the moment, we don't have that, so I'll have this dummy fallback. So let's assume we found a place though. If we did, of course, I want to render a form here, and I want to render a form which I initialize with values from that place. So here, let's return a form element again, like this, and in there, render all the inputs we need. So let's import some inputs again. Up there, I'll import input from And now again, go to the shared folder, components, form elements, input, and we'll also need the button from there, so we can also import that already and get the button from the exact same folder in form elements, button. With those imports added, back to the form. In the form, I want to render my inputs. And the inputs I have here is a title input and then also a description input, because these should be the two pieces of information that should be changeable, that should be editable by users after a place was created. So the element here for the title is input, type is text, I want to have a normal text input. The label will be title, and validators will be an array where I of course now need my validators. So for that, let's import from shared util validators, and I want to import validator require here and validator min length, because these again are the two validators we need here. So down there, here I execute validator require as a function. We can also provide our error text where I say, please enter a valid title. And of course on input, where we get the entered value and validity of that value. Now the function we add here, that's something I'll focus on later. Of course we can use the same function as in new place, but then we also have to add use reducer and everything to update place. And that means a lot of code duplication. So maybe we can find a more elegant way there. Now, one other issue we'll have here is in this scenario, when we're editing a place, I actually also want to set an initial value on the input. And that's something we don't currently support. I want to be able to set my value here to, well, as I said, some initial form value. So initially to identified place.title, for example. So that's also something we'll need to support. And therefore, we also want to set an initial validity. And in the end, set this to true here, you could say. Because, of course, since we have a title initially, it initially also is valid already. So we'll need to tweak our input component a little bit. Before we do so, though, I'll add my description element here, which is a text area. Type is therefore not required. Label is description, and here I need the min length validator and set a min length of 5 and say please set a valid description min 5 characters. And here of course I want to initialize this with the identified place description, set validity to true, and we'll have to see what we do with on input. So let's still add the button though. There the type should be submit. It should be disabled if the form is invalid. So initially it is enabled because initially this form is valid, of course, because we do have initial values for title and description, but we'll also have to revisit this logic. And then here I'll say update place. So as you can tell, we have some work to do. We need to adjust the input component to be more flexible and accept initial values and initial validities. And we want to look into reusing some form code, maybe reuse this reducer and so on, so that we don't have to duplicate so much code. So let's focus on the input component though.